Hello, everyone. It's me, Remote from BFDI. Remember back in 2024 when I announced Bullard Street? Well, today, I have some bad news and good news to share with you all, in case you haven't been catching up with Graham's recent community posts. The bad news is, Bullard Street is unfortunately cancelled. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but if you want more detailed information on why it's cancelled, you can check Graham's community posts after this video. However, the good news is that Bullard Street is officially getting replaced with a brand new show, which will be called Bullard's World. And that's what this video will be about. I'm going to be explaining all the basic information for you to know about Bullard's World, especially if you haven't been seeing Graham's recent community posts. But before we talk about the show itself, I'm going to share a history story about how Graham got this idea. Believe it or not, but Graham originally got the idea for a show like this ever since he was a toddler. Let me explain. Back when Graham was a very small child, he always loved to watch children's TV shows, especially animated ones. However, unlike most young children, who just seem to generally like TV shows in a casual way, Graham had much more of an affinity with my favorite shows. And because he was super into these kinds of shows and the art of animation as a whole, he always thought this to myself. What if one day, I make my own animated show, with all my favorite characters coming together and interacting with each other? That's the early origins of Bullard Street's foundation. However, despite Graham's huge desire to make a show like that, he never had any idea of what to call it. That is, until he watched the old Glasses Street series made by Patrick Jenner, and it was at that point that Graham knew what to call his animated crossover series. A few years later, Graham watched another online series with a similar concept to Glasses Street, which was a show created by Higby Productions called Plush Sweet Plush. This new series motivated Graham even more to make Bullard Street, which led to him thinking of episode ideas in September 2022. But even though Graham was motivated to start production on GBS, he didn't do it until 2024, which was when he officially made his first talk. But after making a few episodes, Graham looked back on them, and he wasn't exactly satisfied with how they held up. So he decided to remake the series using Adobe Animate. However, because he never used Adobe Animate before at the time, it took Graham a very long time to recreate the show in that software. Eventually, he looked back on what he did, and he still wasn't satisfied, which led him to restart the whole show not once, but twice. But recently, Graham looked back on all of his plans for Bullard Street, and he slowly started to realize that GBS as a whole was just a major rip-off of Sesame Street. In short, Graham's main goal was not to rip off a famous preschool show. It was simply to make a crossover show with his favorite characters. As a result, Graham officially made the decision to cancel Bullard Street and replace it with a new original show called Bullard's World, which is where we're at today. So with that said, here is all the information on what you can expect from GBW. Also, on a side note, I'm gonna be referring to Bullard's World as GBW for the rest of the video for the sake of simplicity. So, first things first, much like Bullard Street, GBW will be a crossover show with many of Graham's favorite characters. However, unlike Bullard Street, GBW is mostly an original idea. Instead of focusing on copying Sesame Street, GBW will primarily focus on being a crossover with multiple characters. Speaking of characters, here's a list of all the characters that will appear in GBW. They are from Battle for Dream Island, Inanimate Insanity, Brawl of the Objects, Peanuts, The Loud House, My Big Big Friend, Thomas and Friends, Bob the Builder, Hello Kitty and Friends, Blue's Clues, Bluey, Phineas and Ferb, The Powerpuff Girls, Hi Hi Puffy on Yumi, Ni Hao, Kylan, Max and Ruby, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, My Life as a Teenage Robot, SpongeBob SquarePants, The Fairly OddParents, The Amazing World of Gumball, Sesame Street, Barney and Friends, Teletubbies, and Yoga Bigaba. Of course, there will be more characters added eventually, but these will just be the characters appearing in the first few seasons. As for other information regarding GBW, it will have 15 episodes per season, with each episode having 2 segments that will be 10 to 15 minutes long. Also, another thing that will make GBW different from GBS is the fact that there will be no interactive fourth wall breaks. This is mostly because even though GBW is a show made for children, we also want it to be enjoyed by teenagers and adults, and we are well aware that not all teenagers and adults like typical interactive fourth wall breaks that you see in various kids shows. Moving on, let's talk about how the show will be animated. Unlike the GDS pilot series, which was made in Google Slides, or the cancelled official version of GDS, which was planned to be made in Adobe Animate, GBW will be animated using stop motion animation. However, unlike most stop motion movies and shows, which are usually animated using clay or flat paper cutouts, the characters in GBW will be made out of 3D paper shapes. This is not only because we want the style of GBW to be more unique, but also because we want to animate in a 3D style without using computers, because recently, Graham has kind of been feeling burnt out from animating on computers. Oh, and there's one last thing I need to mention before the video ends. There are still a lot of leftover characters to voice in GBW, so here they are on screen right now. If you want to voice any of these characters in GBW, comment below and Graham will put you into consideration. And that's all the basic information about Graham Bullard's world. If you have any additional questions about the basics of the show, comment below and Graham will write back as soon as possible. Thanks for watching this video, and look forward to more updates on GBW coming soon.